So we've got a few people joining nice and early, which is good. Thanks for those that have joined nice and early. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come in, and then we'll start off with the intros and we'll get cracking with the event. Right, shall we get going with the intros? And if anyone joins late, they'll still see the main event, I'm sure. But yeah, thanks for those joining. Just going to chat through the future of cyber. But first of all, we'll just go through some quick intros, just so you know who you're speaking to. So I'll start. So my name's Lewis. I've been spending my 5th year in recruitment now. I cover all things contract recruitment for cyber across Scotland with Harvey Nash. That's me.
Hi there, I'm Lowry. I work on Harvey Nash Scotland's permanent desk, specialising in cybersecurity and change.
I guess over to me. My name is Jim Tiller. I'm the CISO for Nash Squared. I've been in security since since the early 90s, back when they invented the wheel kind of thing, and really looking forward to this conversation. Having worked with companies like HP, British Telecom, Lucid Technologies, Bell Labs, before coming to Nash Squared and helping us with our global cybersecurity. So over to you, Graham.
Thanks, Graham Watson. I've been in information and cybersecurity for around 20 years. So I've worked in service providers, I've worked for consultancies, and I've worked for end users. And most in the more recent years, I've been doing interim and permanent information security leadership roles.
Right, and just if anyone who's attending, you can actually ask your own questions throughout. There's a Q&A chat box, and we will try our very best to get through them all and ask where we can.
Cool, so our main topics that we're covering today, so we've got emerging trends and insights, we've got looking at careers, skills and leadership, and then finally cybersecurity culture. So we'll get started. Graham, I'm coming to you first. So what are the trends that are piquing your interest at the moment?
In terms of interest, there are two at the moment. So the automation skills gap is one that's kind of bubbling up for me. So anybody that's got a semi-secure SOC capability is finding that they're not able to cover everything they want in terms of activities. For example, not being able to actually react quickly enough based on the telemetry that's coming in. So automation's increasingly being viewed as the fix to that. But what occurs to me is, what will the skills gap be based on that? Because as a SOC analyst, and having been one myself many years ago, 95% of the training to become a security analyst in a SOC is the day job. So if most of that's taken away, how do you learn? How do you understand how things hang together? So that's interesting in terms of how that's going to develop, because it'll have an impact on org structures, training burden that organizations will have, and how to attract and retain skills as well. So that's the first one. And then the other one is algorithmic dependency, as I call it anyway. So we're increasingly having to consume services that are based on an algorithm. So how do we how do we get comfort that they're doing the right thing in line with our values and delivering the right outcomes. So how do we get access to the algorithm to make an assessment, and how do we have the right skills, etc. So that's the two most interesting things that I've come across recently.
I'm just going to build on what Graham said there. And, I think about some of the things I think about, obviously, is around sort of the automation is really the role of AI is beginning to play in cyber. We're seeing it mostly from a kind of a threat perspective, but I'm kind of curious to see how we start using elements of that and addressing different things. Maybe it's user security, user awareness training. I'm not really sure, but I think we're using elements of it and ML, like Graham referred to in SOC and in the SOC world. That's going to really kind of begin to elevate the requirements of analysts, I think. I don't know if Graham would agree with me on that, but I think it's going to challenge that group. When we think of other things that I think are popping up a lot, is I think is zero trust all the time. I could argue it's sort of old school made new school a little bit, because it's still kind of based on the fundamentals. But I think the key difference here is we're working in an environment and technology environments that are giving us the ability to move to zero trust, okay? And so now we're looking at all the stuff that comes with working in the cloud, third parties, suppliers, software. Graham already mentioned those pieces of what is actually an algorithm doing, which is brilliant. Those are questions that are gonna really kind of challenge us all moving forward. But I think zero trust is gonna become the big one moving forward, because it just touches into all those things to where, who's in our systems, what are they doing, and make it very sort of real to what they need to do. And when we say zero trust, it's not just people, it's processes, applications, and other systems and networks and stuff like that. So those are going to be the big ones.
Great. Just seeing no questions just yet, so we will move on. So considering the trends, there's actually, according to Harvey Nash's digital leadership report, 70% of digital leaders report there's a skill shortage, preventing them actually keeping up with the pace of change. So bearing this in mind, what cyber skills could you actually be upskilling and to keep relevant within your job? So I'll ask that question to you first of all, Jim.
Okay, so this is a big one. So first and foremost, there's actually been other surveys, including ours, that show that even people in the security industry today are looking at changing industries, right? Meanwhile, we're trying to get more and more people to move into the cyber industry because there's a skills gap. I mean, this report anywhere from, I've seen numbers between 3 as much as 3.5 million empty seats in security. And those are real things. Those are real seats to be filled. But I would say is that getting into the cyber industry today is I'm not going to say it's easy, but there's a lot out there that's free, accessible, it can teach you the basics. It's actually, the cybersecurity community is pretty collaborative and sharing of knowledge, right? So the challenge is what to do, right? And that's where I think a lot of people are getting caught up. I always refer to the fact that we have over 450, closer to 470 different certifications in cybersecurity, right? Which is completely bonkers. And that is consumers of cybersecurity expertise going, I don't really know what I want, but is there a sort of a certification that does that? And of course the certification industry is just happy to go, yeah, sure, we'll pop one out for $1,000. And then of course on the supply side, the pros, us, people on this call, we're trying to figure out, okay, what certification I need to really kind of get the job that I want, and so this is where you get into this sort of process of what certification, whatever, and things like that. I actually believe, you should do everything you can just to get that entry job, because there's so much available to you, you can take all these different paths that kind of mold with what your DNA like, or what you like doing today is going to be versus maybe different from what you like doing tomorrow. So you might get into pen testing or do analyst work in a SOC or in threat hunting this way, or you might say, I want to do risk and compliance and I want to go into AI and stuff. There's really a lot of things that you can do. But it's an interesting challenge when we talk about the skills gap. And I think there's a bit of fear of where to start. Like people think that they're just putting their stake in the ground. And my recommendation would be just go for it. You know, find a job and just go, and then keep your eyes open, keep looking for opportunities. Graham, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's no golden certification, is there? Yeah, I guess I was, and Jim, you've been in the industry for way longer than I have, but you know, a few years ago, there was a lot less certifications. There was some things from ISACA, there was something from CISP, ISC squared, the CISP. It was quite easy to go, I'll just do that because that's the standard that people will ask for. But now there's so much choice. There's almost too much choice. So I think you're right. Do whatever you can to get into the industry, and then iterate from there. Do certifications, but there's not one that's going to last you forever, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that I can say in my career, that's how we just kind of stumbled into it a little bit, right? But I've met a lot of people, not unlike yourself and others, who may have started it as an analyst or may have started in, IT security, or, there are people that are out there that had started in IT and started doing, say, like, naturally moved into like endpoint security almost, right? They, or patching, picket, and then they just kind of like, wow, this is kind of interesting stuff, and they just follow their nose. So if you're looking at doing it and developing that talent, that's the way to go. I would add, Graham, is big thing for me is I think people just need to read a lot. You have to be sort of I think you mentioned this before, a professional learner in some ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best thing that you can do is learn the skill set of learning, because you're never going to have to stop learning. We were talking about emerging trends in the previous question, which is right on point, isn't it? You're always going to have to learn something new. There's always something coming up that you're going to have to get a handle on, and there's such a wide variety of things that are relevant to an information and cybersecurity career that you're never going to be an expert in everything, so you're just going to have to learn as you go.
Yeah, I would add is what I like to share with folks that are getting into cybersecurity is, like I said earlier, don't get wrapped around the axle on doing one thing, because not only is the industry going to change, not only is the technology going to change, but you're going to change, right? So don't get caught up in where you're going to start. Like we said, read a lot, be a professional learner. And I would add to that is don't be afraid of setting goals. I think we talk a lot about setting goals, but don't be afraid to set, 6 month, 1 year, 3, 5, even go for a 10-year, right? Because sometimes when you set a goal, it sets you in that direction. And you can mix and match these types of activities, say, oh, I want to learn how to write Python by the end of the year, kind of thing. And that's something to set a goal on and mix it in there. But it takes work to stay smart on these things.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, knowing yourself, and as you become, some people know themselves really early on, and other people's take longer to know themselves. So if you set a 10-year sort of objective, you might get 5 years through and go, I knew I could have done it, but it wasn't me. So I think be kind to yourself if you're setting objectives.
Or make them really general. Like, I want to be able to write an application in 10 years or something. Who knows what it could be, right?
Yeah.
But it's certainly the short-term goals. But you're right. You don't want to lock yourself into a particular direction.
Jim, so there's quite a strong cyber security university ecosystem in Scotland. Lots of universities pumping out good grads, looking for jobs. And we hear about the global shortage of talent. What do you see in the rest of the world, or in the US? Like, are there those universities putting out good grads, or what's the situation?
I don't know if we have the density that we see in Scotland and maybe in the southern parts of the country, in the UK, kind of thing. The same here in the United States. You'll see a lot of degree programs around like information security management, and then you'll see some things that are specific. And this is why I think we have so many certifications, is we're trying to sort of fill those slots and get that practical knowledge out. So I think you're seeing security integrated more into existing kind of programs like MBAs or computer science degrees. You're seeing more and more security integrated there. That's what I'm seeing as far as here in North America is concerned. Only because I think it's and like in AI, you said something really like spot on earlier about really understanding AI and the algorithms. I think that's a huge deal. And so we're seeing bits of that from more of an integrated approach, but I'm not saying that's better. I think what is happening in Scotland is fundamentally preparing people better, in my opinion.
Okay, cool. So the other thing that I was thinking about was soft skills as well. So my point of view is technology or technological skills, especially relate to certifications, are to get you in the door and they help you maintain yourself in a role, but it's soft skills that help you develop and accelerate your career. How have you handled the development of your soft skills across your career?
I think you bring up some really good points, Graham. I would say the best way to develop soft skills, in my humble opinion, is if you can get into the consulting space. So if you go way, way back, again, back when they invented the wheel, we were still rubbing sticks together. You know, I started working at basically a technology company, you know, maybe like there were 286s and we were there to, fix computers and printers kind of thing, basically. And I was the first like security guy. And being exposed to people, if you go really far back, I was a waiter in a restaurant, So, I will tell you that if you know how to work in the food and beverage industry and interact with customers in high stress environments like that, believe it or not, that actually helps you start sort of moving in that direction of what it means to interface with people in a professional manner as you get older. And so in consulting, you have to carefully walk people through kind of maybe what their challenges are and help them bring them, show them the light, as it were, or give them news they don't want to take, right? So that takes a lot of soft skill development. So use every opportunity to be mindful of how you're interacting with people, and driving those relationships is really, really important. But development is put yourself in that position. That's the only way to learn, I think.
Yeah. There's no certification for those sort of things, is there?
Yeah, no. Did you do consulting, Graham? Did you do a lot of consulting?
I did. Yeah, I've worked for a Big Four consultancy firm, and I worked for SecureWorks as well. And I've done a lot of independent consultancy as well.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the advantage. I say the advantage in the loosest sense or joking sense of working in a service environment before I started my career. I worked in a more manual labor types of environments where there was none of that, and in fact, it was probably the opposite. Training the opposite types of skills in, which probably took longer to help give me an understanding of how and where to develop your soft skills, but it did come eventually. And so the consultancy kind of things, but then also it's maybe a bit of a tangent, but I went to through a few different organizations where I could see the training program or the development path, and I kind of wasn't on board with how they wanted to develop me. So I took that into my own hands, and I started going on social engineering boot camps, and then getting involved in psychology and preference and things like that. That was my route into understanding a bit more about the whole sphere, as opposed to just using the rules of thumb that I could see from other places and organizations. I see you nodding. I think you know what I mean about just if you just say it in this way, it'll work. You're like, no, but why does that work? What's the trick here? So that's why I did.
That's super interesting. I find for some, and maybe this isn't the case now, because a lot of folks I come in contact with seem to manage the transition well, but I know a lot of people that were in the technical space, and they just find it more comforting to work within a technical environment, as opposed to, building out those soft skills and, those types of relationships, because they can be considered fuzzy a little bit, right? And I think for those who are out there that find themselves, especially in a post-COVID environment, from going from lockdown to try to be more soft-skilled and put yourself out there kind of thing. Those are big, can be big challenges for some, and you just have to keep working through it, but just, I think a big deal is just exposing yourself. And I like the idea, Graham, you said, is you have to sort of question the system too, right? It's okay. Don't be afraid of doing that. That's for sure.
I actually had a quick question which sort of tied into that as well. So in terms of the soft skills, if people are used to working in a technical environment and maybe don't have that service experience, when it comes to reaching out for help or training or support, how have you done that in the past? Because sometimes it can be a little daunting. Obviously, some companies are making a big effort in terms of training budgets and things like that, and they're pretty proactive. But how have you done it in the past, and what advice would you give?
Jim, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I was literally about to hand to you. So I'm going to basically cheat in my answer. I'm going to say there's so much out there already for free. And it kind of goes back to what we said about being a professional learner. Underlying all that is, you just, to be in cyber, there's a couple of base elements you have to have. And that is just sort of this built-in sense of curiosity, just like, well, I want to know more about that, or this sort of sense of questioning or investigative sort of mindset. I don't care if you're, if you were 5 years old pulling apart your toys kind of thing, or, whatever the case may be, is kind of wanting to look at the next level. Because if you peel the covers back and you get past all the goo in the internet a little bit, there's actually some really amazing gems of sort of building that up. But once you get sort of in to make that transition to more, being less just technical, I recommend maybe broad case certifications, like, Graham mentioned CISSP, CISM, CISA. These things talk about risk and compliance, build study groups in some cases. I highly recommend building study groups. You can find them on different social media platforms, all that kind of stuff. So you can really kind of use the building of a skill and a certification combining with soft skills by working with, like-minded people with a similar goal. So that's what I would recommend. And training budgets are always a tricky one. I think if you're looking for a job and you're, it's always exciting getting that first job in security, but you have to also stay true to yourself. And that is, ask the question, what is the training budget, or what do I have to do to get access to a training budget, right? Because you just can't be in this type of profession and not have continuous training in some form or fashion. Just because it's free and you can find on the internet doesn't mean you don't need, formal training. So what do you think, Graham?
Yeah, you said some great stuff there. I think the one thing that I would possibly add to that is, if you can find somebody or people that you can speak to, whether it's on a regular basis or on a one-off, that can give you some sort of insight. I would say it would be like a mentor relationship if it was often, or by chance, one-off. I think you just need to work out whether somebody's got an axe to grind, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Like, what is it, what are they truly abstracted from the conversation? But if you can find that kind of conversation relationship, you'll get some huge insight to that. You're struggling with something, you're struggling with where you are in your career, you'll often find that somebody that's been there and done that will have been through the same situation and is able to sort of contextualize that for you, and then will allow you to kind of step back and go, okay, what is it? What's the frustration and what do I need to learn? I think if you could get that and amongst what you said as well, I think that'd be great.
Wow, that's a really good point. Is there a lot of, Graham, you're right there, obviously in Scotland. I'm way over here in the United States, but I mean, are there a lot of opportunities for people to meet, and like, is there different events and, like ISACA events or IC squared events and stuff like that, or just regional stuff?
There's loads. There's almost so much that you won't be able to go to all of them.
That's cool.
But I think the key thing would be for people to go to them and speak to other people, not just to speak to who you know, because there are people that are out there that are willing to have a conversation and willing, and are enthused to help people in their career. So I think as long as people are going to them and not too shy to have a conversation, and it doesn't need to be the speaker. Just speak to some people in real life, IRL, as they say.
You know, bring up a really good point, and that is, don't speak to just people you know, right? That's only, you know, a portion of the equation, right? Speak to anybody you can bump into, which, by the way, is really hard for me, ironically. I'm not good at meeting new people in environments like that, but you know, it's difficult for a lot of people. But you know, I think 99.99% of people you're going to come in contact with in the security industry want you to be successful. They want you to enjoy it, get the most out of it. And like you, Graham, you know, you've been in this rodeo for a long time. You know, there's a lot of scars and bruises I'm sure you have that you can help others avoid, right?
Hopefully, yeah, because some of them still make me rock in a corner every now and again. Yeah,
that's funny.
I did have something else to say, but that completely diverted my.
Yeah. I'm just had this picture of rocking in the corner. I know it. Yeah, exactly. Been there, done that.
Cool. Do we have any questions on that subject, Lewis or Lowry?
Not yet, but it does sort of lead on to my other one. We've covered sort of the challenges of people in sort of operational roles, but I guess what are the biggest challenges facing leaders in cybersecurity as well?
From leadership perspective, is that what you said? Biggest challenges facing leaders?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh man. I mean, everything. I think the biggest part is, for me, there's what keeps you up at night when you're running a security program is, are you going to get that call in the middle of the night kind of thing? You know, what have you not done? What's happening that you're not seeing? I think if I were to be just completely straightforward with that, you know, have you done enough? Do you know where your risks are? You know, that kind of thing. You know, so, but I think, ironically, I know we've been talking about people a lot, and it's also taking care of your team. You know, I think leadership and security is, you know, security is not something you do by yourself, and everybody in the team is a team by the very nature of it. So you always have to look for, how are you helping them as individuals? How are you helping them as a group? Is everybody staying interested, engaged, and utilized in a way they want to? Are they seeing their trajectory in their career the right way they want to? You know, because at the end of the day, if somebody's not happy in their job, they're just not going to be, you know, they're not going to be doing a good job. I mean, I know, you know, everybody goes through that, right? If you're just like not feeling it, you know, it's hard to stay, you know, on top of things. And so, you know, I think there's worrying about technology, and there's worrying about what I'm missing, all this kind of jazz. But at the end of the day, what ultimately is going through my mind is, are the people that are in the team, are they being fulfilled? Are they on a path that they want to be on? And because if they're engaging, then they can do amazing things. People can do amazing things. So that's where you just focus your energy. I know it's a little bit of a big gooey answer, not a lot of detail there, but at the end of the day, it's people. Let's just call it duck a duck.
Yeah, I wouldn't have anything to add to that. That was yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Right on the head. Yeah, that bit about people might call it innovation, but just that freedom to bring more of themselves is a huge part, isn't it? Because you can create an organization that's kind of very constrained and will do what you say, versus, you know, people that are enthused and willing to be creative is probably the biggest difference in this industry, isn't it?
Mm. So we do actually, Rash had a question quite recently, Graham, on what you mentioned about there being a lot of activities locally, you know, to get involved and chat about cyber. Someone's made a point that they find a lot of these activities are down in London or virtual, not seeing too many in Scotland. I'm aware that there is the CyberScotland group. They tend to post a lot of their meetings on Meetup. I think Larry and myself have actually been to a couple of these, obviously with less cyber experience than majority of people doing cyber as a main career. So it is open to anybody of any skill set as well. I don't know if there's any more that you could highlight there, Graham.
So I'm a member of ISACA. So I went to their most recent event, and I'm pretty sure that you don't need to be a member. You know, it's open more broadly than that. And then I guess I'll probably not mention them because I'm not sure if I should, but there's organizations that their business is putting on events, they're usually very good. And I can think of at least 2 off the top of my head. And then I'm not sure how current they are, but there was always an active OWASP chapter. I think there's quite a bit out there.
Definitely. And if the person who posted the question would be interested in the meetup, I can certainly direct you the right way, because you will be able to get in touch with us after the event. So I'm happy to point you in the right direction there as well. There was another question as well. It's probably more for you, Graham. Would you agree that the majority of jobs in Scotland are Glasgow and Edinburgh based?
Yeah, that's fair. If you're talking about population centres, yes, absolutely. There's a small number in Dundee and small number in Aberdeen, but then it's equally the same. There's a lot less jobs in Scotland than there are in London. Yeah. I think it would be much nicer for everyone if there was a more equal distribution, but that's the way things are. Yeah.
Cool. And there's one more question. I've actually just spotted some of the questions here that have started flooding in now. Someone's mentioned, so this is actually referring back to earlier in the call. So what's your approach when it comes to ensuring that security controls are implemented and enforced in established environments? So not necessarily built by following the best practices, by not adversely impacting the functionality and usability. If that makes sense.
I've had this question many times myself. So you walk into an environment, you're like the new person that's got to figure all this out. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not really sure best practices, but I got to figure out if the controls that need to be established or in policy are being done. There's really no one source technology that's going to solve that problem for you, right? One is I would look at what kind of technology you have your availability and then utilize those. I mean, I look at like CMDBs or other types of systems that collect telemetry or information about assets, right? Asset management database, that kind of stuff. But you're not just going to run a vulnerability scan kind of thing, right? To see if those controls are in place. You're going to have to dig, but you'll get 80% of the picture with 20% of the effort. It's just that last little bit. But sometimes what I do is I break it up in 2 giant sections. I kind of work on policy and procedure and look at what policy we set and just kind of get orientated. And then I start picking off the really easy ones inside the policy, like minimum password length or something. And I'm like, okay, what is it set in AAD, or what is it set in whatever system you're using or the systems that you're using? And you just keep going back and forth. You've whittled that down. But the biggest recommendation I would have is, instead of looking for controls that you have or where the gaps may be, go 2 things in the beginning. One, look at what are the controls that you believe you need. So you're looking for, the right things. Understand those. So you're looking at potentially intent of control. And then I would swing over and completely go a different direction and say, okay, what are the technologies at my disposal to collect that information in a more readily fashion? So that's the biggest challenge, is getting the information from systems and people and all that kind of stuff. And I'll just before I go over to Graham, this is where those soft skills really play, because somebody implemented those controls, and you may be under the impression that they were not necessarily following best practices, but somebody there owns that control, right? Somebody put that in place. So you don't want to create necessarily a community of enemies. This goes back to consulting, right? Is recognize that somebody there probably was a big part of implementing them, and you want that person to be part of your overall approach. That'd be my take on it. Graham, what are your thoughts? It's actually a very hard question to answer.
I think, there's always a lot of effort has to go into confirming the controls. I think you made a really good point about are the controls relevant? So I've been in quite a few environments where for whatever reason, a control has been applied across everything, but it's not always the case that it needs to be. Somebody could have taken a compliance or, security standard approach where actually in the world that you're looking in, potentially threat or risk based, then it's not as relevant. So I guess you from there you'll be able to know which battles to fight. I think that would probably be the bit that I would add on, Jim.
Just another couple of questions. We'll fire through these and then we can move into our final section of the event. Tough one here. So how can the public sector compete with the private sector over the skills gap when there isn't sufficient skilled staff to go around? It's a tough one, very topical as well at the moment.
Graham, I'm gonna let you take the first stab at that one.
My first stab would be, Lewis, what do you think about that one? Honestly, I don't know, because I know some of the limiting factors, but yeah, it's all about pay conditions, etc. So I don't know how you level those things up. I don't know if there are other parts of the public sector that are struggling to attract skills, but it'd have to be driven by the public sector making a decision. So within cyber, I think it'd be really difficult.
Yeah,
I don't know if Lewis or Larry, you've got a perspective on that.
I mean, I find obviously ever since remote working, people want more and more flexibility in terms of are they fully remote? I think a lot of companies are often fully remote, so if you can offer as much flexibility as possible to people, that might get some of the talent that there is around. So I know there'll be people in Scotland who are working for London-based companies now, so it's definitely it's stretched the pool, shall we say, a fair bit more. That's one of my advice I could give. If you've got anything to add there, Larry, from a permanent perspective, maybe.
No, I think just echoing what you've just said there, I think people offering remote work, obviously it works both ways. People can look for jobs in different places, but if you can work it as an employer that you can hire people in different places, then I guess it's a positive for you as well. But I guess in the permanent market, we all see it on the news, the cost of living crisis, etc. Pay is often at the forefront of people's minds, and where maybe the public sector people would accept having maybe a little bit of a lower salary because the benefits are so brilliant. It's often a job for life. It's the public sector. It's got that stability for people. It is a challenge in cyber to be sure, when sort of skills and everything are in so much demand in the private sector as well. I'm not sure if that's very helpful.
It's tough. I know obviously time tends to be of the essence when you're working on projects as well, but if you do have a little bit of leeway, if you bring in one expert and you can upskill a lot of junior people with their knowledge, maybe bring in a contractor to upskill a more junior team of permanent staff and keep them around for a bit longer. That's another approach, but it's a very tough market just now. So
I wonder if the public sector are leveraging enough people's desire to work for a purpose, rather than they just exist and saying there's a job, but really what are you protecting? I think that really ignites some people. I wonder if the public sector are leveraging that facet of the ecosystem enough.
Yeah.
People may accept the downsides of the pay situation for doing valuable work. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose telling a great story. I know obviously some of the programs with the Scottish government, you can tell a great story about the benefit you're giving to people with the work you're doing. That's in the past. So I know I've spoken to people who really enjoy doing that kind of work. So something to leverage off for sure. Quick one here. Someone's mentioned the CyberScotland group. So from what I'm aware, it's not just public sector. The event I attended, there was private sector, public sector alike. So certainly not limited. And if you are in the insurance industry, I'm sure you can still attend these events and get plenty of value. Okay, we've got one more question. We'll quickly blast through this last question for Michael again, and then we can finish off the event. So again, from our experience, do we think people would rather be on a lower pay but remote working over being on a hybrid contract that pays more? I think it's very much down, from my experience, down to their personal circumstances. You see some people who might have families, young families. They need to be remote working to be with their children. People in that situation would certainly, in my experience, prefer lower pay, but the flexibility that goes with it. Other people obviously would prefer the pay and a little bit of travel involved. So it totally depends on someone's personality and situation, in my opinion. Anything to add from anybody else?
I would just add that I think companies need to recognize, I think two things need to happen. Companies need to recognize that this is the standard now, right? This question isn't really going to go away. And I think secondarily is, I think if you want to work remotely, I think part of looking for that job is I would incorporate a conversation about how you work remotely, you know, because I think some people before COVID never worked from home or remotely, you know, where flip side, some people have worked their entire careers on the road, as it were, right, from home or travel kind of thing. And so I think is if you can display and demonstrate that you have the ability to self-motivate, get up in the morning, get on your computer and start getting your job done and show that you can be a contributing part of the business, whether you're in office or not, I think that plays very well into helping them support that more flexible role. So well positioned, you can get both, right? You know what I mean? You can go for a good paying job and say, okay, you know, I'm really good, but I can work very effectively remotely. You know, I'm sure I'm speaking for most people on this call, on this panel, and as well as on the call itself is, you know, sometimes when you get into a good rhythm working from home, you're going to get 10 times more work done. You know, in an office environment, you're just getting interrupted and stuff like that. When in fact, when you can really get heads down and get something done, you can really get it done. And I think we just have to recognize that's a skill set, and we have to companies have to recognize that it's very feasible. You know, so I would incorporate that into the conversation, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we're running short on time, so we'll quickly we'll get to our final point around obviously the cybersecurity culture. It's obviously a very broad topic. So I'll ask this question to you, Graham. And what would you consider when implementing a cybersecurity culture? I think maybe start off with if you can have a quick recap of what a cybersecurity culture really means within a business.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll probably start with what is organizational culture, and we'll take it from there if that's okay. So organizational culture is the way things are done around here, in inverted quotes, but to be more sort of precise around the description of it, psychologist Edward Sheen, I think it is, created a three-layer model. So the top is the artifacts, as in symbols that you see, symbols and language that's used. And then there's on the level below that, there's norms and values around appropriate behavior and attitudes. And then below that, there's underlying assumptions and beliefs. So the artifacts, as in the symbols and the things that you can look at and the things that you hear, those are the visible ones, and they're above the surface. Everything else is larger and below the surface. So that's the culture of the organization at large. And probably lots of us have heard about Peter Drucker and his famous phrase, which he didn't really say, but people have paraphrased into something useful. So culture eats strategy for breakfast, that eats information security leaders for lunch, I think, if you're not good at handling culture well. So I think that's sorry, I don't want to go too far. I could talk about culture for a long time. So I've covered what culture is at large, and then, you know, by extension, security culture is embedding that within a wider culture. Do you want me to expand on that, or how should we go?
No, that's all good. I think that explains it really well. So what would you, bearing that in mind, what would you consider, what should you consider, I suppose, when you're trying to implement the culture and the values, shall we say?
So I think it's probably things to avoid, or the understanding of what you need to do to embed a security culture. I've seen places take that as you need to make sure that everybody's thinking about security all the time, talking about it and doing everything. Every time they do something, they're thinking about security. And also, hopefully in a measurable way, so that in your information security framework, you can reference that. But it puts a huge burden on the organization and can make you unpopular. So my point of view is that you should take a more minimalist approach. You should be really trying to understand what culture is, the culture across the whole organization, and then making the minimal cultural changes that you need to make. And that's because a couple of main things, but it's difficult to understand culture. and takes time. So you need to be careful about doing that. And the other thing is not seen to be meddling. So the CEO or whoever leads the organization, they're responsible for the culture. And then they'll have another main top level person that's heavily invested in that. So if you're going around talking about culture change, you may find yourself at odds with the organization when you don't really want to be. So I think I would say be careful, take it slower, and don't be very careful about the use of the phrase culture change. I don't know, Jim, what are your thoughts?
Oh goodness, I honestly don't know if I could add to that. That was perfect. The only thing I can think of to add 2 cents to that piece that you said, it was, I always find that if you can always somehow make security, obviously build it into the security culture, which is hugely complex, is also find ways of making it valuable to the individual in the company somehow. I think security can be just extraordinarily boring. It has a very sort of police feel to it. And so I think if you head down that path, really take very seriously what Graham just said about culture change, because you can find yourself in trouble. Figure out what it is and build on what's already there, or whatever is being constructed, and then find a way of embracing at a human level with people. Like, how can they protect themselves at home and their families, and just make it more informational, as opposed to here are the policies kind of thing. So whatever it is, try to embrace it from a human aspect of it. But everything Graham said was perfect, 100%.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, unfortunately, I think that's all we've got time for this afternoon. I feel like we could keep going for hours on this. But no, thank you so much to our speakers, Graham and Jim. Hopefully they've given you a lot of food for thought to take away from this. A video of today's session is actually going to be available soon on our YouTube channel. We'll post it on LinkedIn, and it will be on the website as well. So if you'd like to share that with your colleagues and friends, please do. We are, of course, holding the session as part of CyberScotland Week, so please do have a look at their website. There's lots more events coming up this week, both online and near you in person as well, if you are looking for something. So that's CyberScotland Week if you're looking for more events. Lewis and myself are available if you've got any follow-up questions at all, whether that's about the event or future events that you'd love to get involved with. Please do contact us. And that's also if you're looking for a new role or recruitment support, whether that's contract or permanent, just get in touch. We are happy to help. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. That was great. And hopefully see you for the next one. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone who attended as well. Have a good day.